Our beliefs drive everything we do. So today we're going to talk about the unbelievable power of belief. Well, we've been talking about beliefs and how beliefs drive our behavior. Today we're talking about the unbelievable power of belief. So where do our beliefs come from? Most of the time, we tend to just accept them without really recognizing that this is a belief that we've created. In the book, The Four Agreements, it talks about that beliefs are oftentimes societal beliefs that we just accept and make them a part of who we are. We've been talking about how important it is to make sure that our beliefs are based on truth or based on principles. So think about where your beliefs have come from in your life. A lot of them probably from your family, sometimes from the media, friends, and sometimes just through reading and studying, we'll come up with our own beliefs. But let me share with you just a short example that I think illustrates this of oftentimes how we create beliefs or accept beliefs and don't really even realize it. Now, some of you may have heard this analogy, but it's a mom and she's fixing dinner with her little daughter and they're cooking ham. And so the mom takes the ham and she puts it on the counter and she cuts off both ends of the ham. She puts it in the pot and then she puts it in the oven. And her little daughter says, "Mom, why did you cut the ends of the ham off?" And the mom said, "Well, that's just what you do when you bake a ham." And her daughter said, "Yeah, but why?" And mom said, "Well, I don't know. That's just what you do." And her daughter persisted and kept asking. And so finally her mom said, "Well, you know what? Let's call up Grandma and see what she says. See if she can tell us why we cut off the ends of the ham." So they called up Grandma and said, "Grandma, why do you cut off the ends of the ham before you put it in the pot and put it in the oven?" And Grandma said, "Well, that's just what you do. That's what you do when you bake a ham." And the granddaughter persisted and said, "Yeah, but Grandma, why?" And she said, "Well, I don't know." And in this case, great-grandmother happened to still be alive, so they decided to call great-grandma and ask her why you cut the ends of the ham off before you bake it. And so they asked her the question, and great-grandmother said, "Well, that's the only way I could get the ham to fit in my pot." So think about that. How many beliefs do we accept or do we create just because we observe or somebody else does something and we see it and we just think that's the way that it is and we never question it? Those beliefs then go into our subconscious mind and drive our behaviors. So, and as we've talked in other videos, 90% of our day we're operating from the subconscious. We're operating on autopilot. So our beliefs are very powerful and drive every behavior that we do in our life. So let's talk about the power of belief and the power of our mind and how that affects us and our behaviors. I'm going to share just some personal examples. About 10 years ago, I started running for exercise, and I hadn't run for a while, and so I slowly kind of worked back into it. And I started with running some 10K races, which are about 6 miles. And when I began running those races, I would do okay for the first 3 to 4 to 5 miles of the race. And then the last mile, I would physically about die. And so I'd done a couple of 10Ks, and then I ran a 5K race. So that's half the distance of a 10K. It's about 3 miles. And it was interesting because at the end of the second mile, running the final third mile, I thought I was going to die. So then I decided to run a half marathon. Now I'd run 5Ks. I found that I could run 2 miles before I started getting really tired. So the last mile was really hard. Then I would run a 10K race. I would feel good for the first 4 or 5 miles and then be really tired for the last mile. So when I ran a half marathon, I found it interesting that at 6 miles into the race, so the 10K distance, I was feeling fine. And my time was the same as my time in running a 10K race. And I felt good until about mile number 10. And this was a 13-mile race. So from 10 miles to 13 miles, I struggled. And I felt like I barely made it to the finish line. And this was a year that I was planning on running a marathon. So a marathon is 26 miles. So at the end of the 13 miles, I didn't feel like I could run a step further. And I remember talking to a guy that I had met during the race, and I said to him, you know, I was planning on running a marathon this year, but there is no way I could run an additional 13 miles. I just barely made it the first 13 miles. And he kind of laughed and he said, I've run a few marathons, and he says, it's all in your head. He said, you can do it. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to do it. And so I ran a marathon that year. And it was interesting because at 13 miles, so halfway through, I felt fine. And I actually felt fine up until mile 25. And so with 1 mile left to go, I started just dying. I didn't feel like I could finish, but I finished the race. So what is it? What made the difference? Because I told myself, this is all in my mind, and I should be able to overcome that thought and to be able to tell myself, you know, when I'm running a half marathon or a 10K, maybe I'll tell myself I'm actually running further than I'm going to run, and so that I won't get tired at the end of the race. Never has happened. In all the races that I've run, I am always totally beat and worn out at the very end of the race. So that's kind of a negative way in which the power of belief restricts us and keeps us from accomplishing all that we can do. Well, what if we could overcome those doubts? And in order to do that, first of all, we have to be able to identify and know what those are. What are our limiting beliefs? What are we truly capable of doing? And what is it that we can't do? If you look around at our society today, of the technology that we have, the lifestyle that we live, and all that we have in our advances, most of what we have didn't exist, 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 years ago. So if we go back 100 years ago, well, what was possible then versus what we're doing today? In fact, I have a watch on right now that was the Dick Tracy watch when I was a little kid, of being able to talk into your watch. Well, that was all make-believe, but today it's real. Oftentimes we're raised and conditioned to kind of limit ourselves. Don't get our hopes or our expectations up because we may get disappointed. Well, what if we were able to change our belief about failure? What if the truth is that there is no such thing as failure? Robert Kiyosaki talks about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says that his rich dad at one point asked him a question, and he said, what would you be, do, and have if you knew that you could not fail and if money was no object? And Robert's response to that was, well, that's a stupid question, because I can't be, do, and have anything I want. There is a possibility that I could fail, and there are a lot of things that require money. So his rich dad asked him that question again, but what if? What if you could be, do, and have anything that you wanted? If you knew you could not fail, and if money was no object, what would you do? And again, he said, that's a stupid question. I'm not going to answer it. And one more time, his rich dad said, but what if? What if we lived in a world that you could be, do, and have anything that you wanted, that money was no object, and that you could not fail? What would your life be like? And at that point, he began to then say, well, if I could do that, I would do this and this and this and this. Well, what about each one of us? What kind of a life would we live if we knew that anything was possible, if we knew that there were no limits, if we knew that there was no such thing as failure? You know, Thomas Edison was asked one time after he had discovered the light bulb of how he continued time after time after time. He had failed 10,000 times of trying to come up with a filament that would work, and it didn't work. And he said, and he was asked, how did you keep going when you failed so many times? And his response to that was, I never failed. He said, each time I just learned one more thing that wouldn't work. Well, what if that's the way that we approached life? Is there is no such thing as failure. Everything that we do is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to improve. The only failure is when we quit. So I invite you, I invite all of us to look at our limiting beliefs in all areas of our life. How are we allowing our beliefs to keep us from behaving in ways that will give us the outcomes that we really desire in life? Thanks for watching again today. If you want to know more about who we are and what we're doing, go ahead and visit our website below.